My grandmother left me a mountain lodge worth $4.8 million. My father, who disowned me at 18, showed up to the will reading with a wide smile, announcing that we would build it into a family business together. But when the judge reached the final clause of the will, everyone in the room gasped. Their smiles instantly shattered. My father turned pale, my sister-in-law dropped her phone, and for the first time in 14 years, they looked at me with genuine fear. They thought I was just a broke hotel receptionist. They had no idea I was the one holding the deed to their debt. Before I tell you how I brought them to their knees, let me know where you are watching from in the comments below. Please hit like and subscribe if you have ever had to stand up to family members who underestimated your worth. My name is Sophia, and at 32 years old, I have mastered the art of becoming invisible. This skill was necessary when I stepped out of my Uber in front of the glass-walled law firm in downtown Denver. I smoothed down my simple navy blazer and checked my watch. I was 5 minutes early. Just as I reached the curb, a obsidian black Mercedes S-Class screeched to a halt in the no parking zone right in front of me. The valet rushed over, but the driver ignored him. The door swung open, and my father Marcus stepped out. He adjusted his silk tie, checking his reflection in the car window. He looked exactly the same as the day he threw my clothes onto the front lawn 14 years ago. Arrogant, flashy, and completely unaware that the Mercedes he was driving was a rental. I knew this because I recognized the fleet tag on the bumper. From the passenger side emerged Tiffany, my brother's wife. She was dressed in a white designer tracksuit that cost more than my first car, holding her phone up as if shielding herself from reality. She was live streaming. Of course she was. Of course she. "Hey guys, we are here at the lawyer's office for a super important meeting," she chirped into her screen, ignoring the valet asking for the keys. "Big things coming for the family brand. Stay tuned." Then the back door opened. My younger brother Jamal crawled out looking hungover and bored. He spotted me first. His eyes widened slightly, but not with affection. It was a look of annoyance. "Dad," he muttered, nudging Marcus. "Look who decided to show up." Marcus turned. His eyes scanned me from head to toe, lingering on my scuffed leather loafers and my unbranded tote bag. He let out a sharp, cruel laugh that echoed off the concrete. "Well, look at this," Marcus boomed, making sure the people walking by could hear him. "I thought you were dead in a ditch somewhere. Or maybe working at a gas station." "What are you doing here, Sophia?" I gripped the strap of my bag tighter. "I am here for Grandma Hattie's will reading, Marcus, same as you." Marcus stepped into my personal space. The smell of expensive cologne and stale cigar smoke hit me. "Let me make something clear before we go inside," he hissed, his voice dropping to a menacing whisper. "You are not getting a dime." I spoke to Hattie before she passed. "She knew you were a disappointment. If you are here to beg for change or ask for a loan, you can turn around and get back in your little Uber." I held his gaze. I did not flinch. That was the old Sophia. The new Sophia had just closed a $50 million merger for a hotel chain in Dubai 3 days ago. My phone buzzed in my pocket with an urgent email from my assistant about the contract, but I ignored it. "I do not need your money," I said calmly. Tiffany lowered her phone and stepped up beside Marcus. She looked at me with a mixture of pity and disgust. "Oh my God, Sophia, are those shoes from Goodwill? That is so brave of you." "Seriously, I could never wear used shoes. It is just so unhygienic." She turned back to her phone camera, whispering loudly. "Guys, this is the sister-in-law I told you about, the one who refused to help with our wedding costs. You can see why. It is really sad when people do not have ambition." Jamal laughed, kicking at a loose stone. "Come on, Tiff. Don't waste your battery. Let's just go inside and get our money. I need to put a deposit down on that studio time by 5. They started walking toward the revolving doors, leaving me standing there. But then Karma decided to give me a little preview. Marcus stopped at the fancy coffee cart in the lobby. He ordered 4 large lattes and a sparkling water barking orders at the young barista. When it was time to pay, he tapped his platinum credit card on the reader with a flourish. Beep. Declined. I paused by the entrance watching. Try it again, Marcus snapped. It is a platinum card. It does not decline. The barista looked terrified. I am sorry, sir. It says insufficient funds. Do you have another card? Marcus turned red. He patted his pockets, muttering about banking errors and glitches. Tiffany stopped recording immediately. Jamal looked away, pretending to be interested in a potted plant. Here, I said, stepping forward. I pulled a simple black metal card from my wallet. It had no numbers, just a chip. I tapped it on the reader. Beep? Approved. Keep the change, I told the barista. Marcus stared at the machine, then at me. He looked confused, like he was trying to solve a math problem that did not add up. He snatched his latte from the counter without saying thank you. Do not think this buys you a seat at the table, he sneered, recovering his ego. You probably maxed out your credit limit for the month on that coffee. Irresponsible. He turned and marched toward the elevators, Tiffany and Jamal trailing behind him, like obedient puppies. They had no idea that the black card I just used had no limit. And they certainly had no idea that the bank that just declined Marcus's card was one of the subsidiaries I consulted for. I knew exactly why his card was declined. He was over-leveraged, drowning in debt, and desperate. I took a deep breath and followed them into the elevator. The silence during the ride up to the 20th floor was suffocating. Tiffany kept glancing at my bag, trying to see the brand label that did not exist. Marcus refused to look at me, staring at the floor numbers as they ticked up. Ding! The doors opened to the law firm of Henderson and Associates. Showtime, I whispered to myself. We walked into the conference room. It was lined with mahogany bookshelves and smelled of old paper and lemon polish. Mr. Henderson, my grandmother's lawyer for 40 years, was sitting at the head of the long table. He was a stern man, with silver hair and glasses that sat on the tip of his nose. When he saw me, his eyes softened. Sophia, he said, standing up to shake my hand. It is good to see you. Hattie spoke of you often. Marcus scoffed, throwing his car keys onto the polished table. She probably complained about how ungrateful she was. Let's get this over with, Henderson. I have a meeting with Ritz-Carlton at 2. We are going to turn that dusty old lodge into a gold mine. I took the seat furthest from them. I watched as Marcus leaned back, putting his feet up on the chair next to him. He looked like a king waiting to be crowned. He had no idea the guillotine was already hanging over his neck. Mr. Henderson put on his glasses and opened a thick leather folder. He cleared his throat. We are here to read the last will and testament of Hattie Mae Brooks, he began. Marcus smirked at Jamal. Here comes the payday, son. I folded my hands on the table and waited. The smile on my father's face was about to become the most satisfying thing I had ever destroyed. The air in the conference room was thick enough to choke on. Mr. Henderson adjusted his spectacles and began reading from the thick document in front of him. His voice was monotone, a stark contrast to the electric greed radiating from my father and brother. To my son Marcus, I leave my portfolio of municipal bonds and the cash contents of my savings account at First National. Marcus slapped the table, creating a loud thud that made the paralegal jump. He turned to me with a grin that was all teeth. Did you hear that, Sophia? Bonds. That is real wealth. That is how dynasties are built. He did not ask how much was in the savings account. He just assumed it was a fortune. I happen to know Grandma kept less than $50,000 in that specific account, barely enough to cover the interest on Marcus's mounting debts for a few months. But I stayed silent, watching him preen like a peacock. To my grandson Jamal, Mr. Henderson continued ignoring Marcus's outburst. I leave my 1967 Cadillac DeVille and my collection of vintage vinyl records. Jamal pumped his fist in the air. Yes, that car is a classic. I am going to wrap it in matte black and put 24-inch rims on it. Tiffany rolled her eyes, inspecting her manicure. Great, an old car. Does it even have Bluetooth? You better sell it, Jamal. We need liquid assets, not junk. Then came the silence. Mr. Henderson turned a page. He looked at me, then back at the document. And to my granddaughter, Sophia. Marcus snorted. Here it comes. Probably her old sewing machine, or maybe her collection of porcelain cats. He leaned over to Tiffany and whispered loudly. Hattie probably left her a Bible so she can pray for a better job. Mr. Henderson cleared his throat, his eyes narrowing at my father. To Sophia, I leave my personal jewelry collection and the contents of my safety deposit box at the Aspen branch. Tiffany let out a sharp, mocking laugh. Jewelry? Cute. Probably just costume pearls and old brooches. I will give you $500 for the lot, Sophia. Save you the trip to the pawn shop. I simply nodded at Mr. Henderson. Thank you, I said softly. I knew what was in that safety deposit box. It was not jewelry. It was the original incorporation papers for the lodge dating back to when my grandfather built it with his bare hands. It was history. But to them, it was trash. Now Mr. Henderson said, his voice dropping an octave. We moved to the primary asset of the estate. The room went dead silent. Even the hum of the air conditioner seemed to stop. Marcus leaned forward, his eyes hungry. This was it. This was the reason he had tolerated driving a rental car and pretending to be a grieving son. The Hattie Mountain Lodge, located at 14 Silver Creek Road in Aspen, Colorado. Mr. Henderson paused for effect. Along with the 50 acres of surrounding forest land, current market valuation is $4.8 million. The number hung in the air. $4.8 million. Marcus shot up from his chair so fast it nearly tipped over. He threw his hands up in a victory V. I knew it. He shouted, pacing the small room. I knew she would do the right thing in the end. He turned to me, pointing a finger directly in my face. You hear that? That is nearly $5 million. That is my inheritance. That is respect. He did not even wait for the lawyer to finish the sentence. He pulled out his phone, his thumbs flying across the screen. I am calling the broker at Ritz-Carlton right now. We can have this place listed by tomorrow morning. Tiffany, get the champagne from the car. The cheap stuff is for Sophia. Bring the dom for us. Tiffany was already typing furiously, likely updating her status to heiress. Oh my God, Marcus, we can finally buy that penthouse in Tribeca. And I need a new G-Wagon. White, obviously. Jamal was high-fiving his father. We are rich. We are actually rich. Sophia, maybe if you are nice, we will let you clean the place before we sell it. Give you a little severance pay. I sat frozen, but not out of fear. I was watching Mr. Henderson. He had not moved. He had not smiled. He was just watching them celebrate, a look of profound patience on his face. He let them carry on for a full minute. He let Marcus dial the number for his broker. He let Tiffany plan her shopping spree. He let them inflate their egos until they were ready to burst. Then he calmly tapped his pen on the mahogany table. Click, click, click. The sound cut through their celebration like a knife. Sit down, Marcus, Mr. Henderson said. His voice was not loud, but it carried the weight of 40 years of legal experience. Marcus paused, phone to his ear. Excuse me. I am busy making business moves, Henderson. You just read the will. The lodge is mine. Wrap it up so I can sign the deed. Mr. Henderson shook his head slowly. I did not say the lodge is yours, Marcus. I said the lodge is the asset. I have not yet read the beneficiary clause regarding the property. Marcus lowered the phone slowly. The smile faltered just a fraction. What are you talking about? I am her only son. Who else would she leave it to? The charity for stray dogs. He laughed, but it sounded nervous this time. Mr. Henderson reached into his briefcase and pulled out a small silver flash drive. He plugged it into the laptop connected to the large screen on the wall. Before I read the final designation of ownership for the Hattie Mountain Lodge, there is an addendum, a codicil added 2 weeks prior to her passing. Marcus went pale. A codicil. She was senile 2 weeks ago. She could barely speak. This is fraud, Henderson. If you let that girl manipulate her into changing the will, I will sue you for everything you have. I stayed silent. I had not seen Grandma in 6 months because Marcus had blocked my access to the nursing home, claiming I upset her. I had no idea what was on this drive. Mr. Henderson ignored the threat. He pressed a button on the remote. The large screen flickered to life. Static filled the room for a second, and then there she was. Grandma Hattie. She was sitting in her favorite armchair by the window in the hospice center. She looked frail, her skin like parchment paper, but her eyes were sharp, clear, and focused directly on the camera. Marcus dropped his phone onto the table. It made a cracking sound, but he did not care. He stared at the screen as if he were seeing a ghost. Tiffany stopped chewing her gum. Jamal slumped back in his chair. The room was silent, waiting for the dead to speak. And I had a feeling that whatever she was about to say was going to burn Marcus's fantasy of a $5 million payday to the ground. The pixelated image of my grandmother leaned forward on the screen, her eyes piercing through the digital grain. "Marcus, sit down," she commanded, her voice raspy but authoritative. My father froze halfway out of his chair. Even from the grave, Hattie Mae Brooks commanded respect, or perhaps fear. He slowly lowered himself back into the leather seat. Grandma continued, "I know you are already counting the money, Marcus. I know you have already called your brokers. You see the lodge as a pile of lumber sitting on a gold mine. You never understood that the land breathes, that it holds our history." She paused, taking a wheezing breath that made my chest tighten. "That is why I cannot give it to you. Not yet, not ever, unless there is no other choice." She shifted her gaze as if looking directly at me. "Sophia, my quiet warrior, you have the heart, but do you have the spine? I am leaving the Hattie Mountain Lodge to you." Tiffany gasped, covering her mouth with a manicured hand. "No way. That is impossible." Grandma held up a hand on the screen, silencing the room. "However, ownership comes with a price. I will not have my legacy squandered by incompetence or sold for quick cash. Therefore, this bequest is subject to a performance clause." Mr. Henderson paused the video and read the terms. The screen went black. The silence in the room was deafening. Mr. Henderson adjusted his glasses and looked at me with grave seriousness. "Sophia, please listen carefully. According to the codicil, you are granted immediate provisional title to the lodge. However, to retain permanent ownership, you must demonstrate the viability of the business. Specifically, you must generate a verified net revenue of $500,000 within the next 6 months. $500,000. I kept my face neutral, but my mind was racing. That was an aggressive target for a seasonal lodge that had been neglected for years. Mr. Henderson continued, "If you fail to meet this financial target, or if you voluntarily abandon the property, or resign from management before the 6 months are up, the title will automatically revert to the next of kin. Marcus Brooks." The room exploded with laughter. It came from Marcus. It was a deep guttural sound of pure relief. He slapped his knee, shaking his head. "Oh, Hattie, you old fox. You almost had me there." He turned to me, his eyes dancing with malicious delight. 500,000 in 6 months. "Sophia, you could not sell water in a desert. This is perfect. It is just a delay. A 6-month waiting period before I get my check." Tiffany chimed in, scrolling on her phone. "Wait, so if she quits, we get the house." That is amazing. Sophia hates hard work. Remember when she quit cheerleading in 9th grade? She will last a week, maybe 2 if the Wi-Fi is good. Mr. Henderson raised his voice over their celebration. "There is one final stipulation. To ensure that the terms are met and that the property is not sabotaged by external forces, a family member must reside on the premises as an impartial supervisor. This supervisor will have access to the books and the facility to report back to the estate." Marcus shot his hand up like a student in a classroom. "I will do it. As her father, it is my duty to mentor her, to watch over the family asset." I knew exactly what that meant. He wanted to be there to ensure I failed. He wanted to throw wrenches in the gears, scare away staff, and make my life a living hell until I packed my bags. Mr. Henderson looked at me. "Sophia, Do you accept these terms? If you refuse, the property goes to Marcus immediately. I looked at the document in front of me. It was a trap. A blatant, obvious trap, set by a woman who wanted to test my mettle and baited by a father who wanted to see me break. But they did not know about the SJ Holdings portfolio. They did not know that I specialized in turning around failing luxury resorts in the Maldives and the Swiss Alps. They thought they were sending a lamb to the slaughter, but they were handing the keys to a wolf. I will sign, I said quietly. Marcus grabbed the pen first, signing the supervisor line with a flourish. He leaned over to Jamal, his voice low but audible in the quiet room. We will make her crazy. We will have her out of there in 2 weeks. Then we sell. Jamal snickered, tapping his knuckles against the table. Easy money, Dad. I took the pen from Marcus. His hand brushed mine and he recoiled as if I were contagious. I signed my name, Sophia Brooks, in a clean, sharp script. The ink was black and permanent. As I stood up, the sadness that usually lingered in my eyes when I looked at my family evaporated. In its place came a cold, hard resolve. I picked up my tote bag and looked down at my father. I will see you in Aspen, I said. My voice did not tremble. Marcus waved a hand dismissively. Don't be late. The maids need to start early. I turned and walked out of the conference room. As the heavy glass doors closed behind me, I allowed myself a small, tight smile. They thought the 6-month deadline was a countdown to my failure. They were wrong. It was a countdown to their destruction. I pulled out my phone and dialed my assistant. Cancel my meetings for next week, I told her as I stepped into the elevator. And initiate the transfer of the liquidity fund. I have a lodge to renovate. And I need you to run a full background check on a man named Marcus Brooks. I want to know every debt, every lien, and every secret he has buried. We are going to need ammunition. The elevator doors slid shut, cutting off the sound of their premature celebration. The war had officially begun. The drive to Aspen was usually my favorite journey. The winding roads through the Rockies flanked by towering pines and snow-capped peaks had always been my escape. But today, as I pulled my rental Jeep up the long gravel driveway of the Hattie Mountain Lodge, my stomach was in knots. It had been a week since the will reading, a week of silence from Marcus. Silence that I knew was not peaceful, but strategic. I parked in front of the main entrance, a magnificent structure of timber and stone that seemed to grow out of the mountain itself. But something was wrong. There was a bright red moving truck parked right next to the front steps, blocking the wheelchair ramp my grandmother had installed years ago. And next to it, the black Mercedes rental. I grabbed my bag and stormed up the stairs. The front door, usually locked with a heavy iron deadbolt, was wide open. Rap music was blaring from inside, shaking the vintage stained glass windows. I stepped into the grand lobby. My breath caught in my throat. The lobby, once a sanctuary of quiet elegance with its Persian rugs and antique leather armchairs, looked like a frat house after a party. There were suitcases exploded everywhere. Fast food wrappers littered the hand-carved coffee table. And there, standing in the middle of the room, was Tiffany. She was directing 2 movers who were struggling to carry a massive neon pink velvet sofa through the door. Careful, careful, she screeched, sipping a green smoothie. That is custom made from Italy. Do not scratch the legs. Tiffany, I shouted over the music. What is going on here? She turned, looking surprised but not guilty. Oh, hey, Sophia. You are finally here. We have been waiting for hours. The Wi-Fi is terrible, by the way. You need to fix that. I marched over to the stereo and yanked the cord out of the wall. The silence was sudden and jarring. I asked you a question, I said, my voice trembling with rage. What are you doing here? And what is that hideous couch doing in my lobby? Tiffany sighed, rolling her eyes. It is called interior design, Sophia. Look around. This place is depressing. It smells like old people and pine needles. We are giving it a vibe. You know, for the gram. Before I could respond, a heavy thud came from the second floor. Then the sound of shattering glass. I ran up the stairs, my heart pounding. The noise had come from the master suite. Grandma Hattie's room, the room she had died in, the room I had promised myself I would keep exactly as she left it. I burst through the double doors and froze. Marcus was standing in the middle of the room. He was wearing a silk bathrobe that I recognized as one of the complimentary ones for guests. He was holding a golf club. On the floor, shattered into 1,000 pieces, was Grandma's collection of crystal figurines, the ones she had collected from every country she had visited. "Whoops," Marcus said, not looking sorry at all. "Practicing my swing. The space in here is decent, but we need to clear out this junk." I looked at the corner of the room. The antique vanity table where Grandma used to brush my hair was gone. In its place was a stack of cardboard boxes labeled Tiffany's Glam Room. "Where is her vanity?" I whispered. "Where are her photos?" Marcus shrugged, taking another practice swing. "In the hallway. Or maybe the trash." I told the movers to get rid of anything that looked like it belonged in a flea market. "We are modernizing Sophia. Remember the goal, 500,000. You cannot make money with a museum." I walked over to the window and looked down. There in the dumpster the movers had brought, I saw the edge of Grandma's hand-stitched quilt, the one she had made for me when I was 10. Something inside me snapped, but it was not a hot, explosive anger. It was cold. Absolute zero. "Get out," I said. My voice was low, dangerous. "Get out of this room. Get out of this lodge. Now." Marcus laughed. He leaned on the golf club and smirked. "Or what? You will call the cops. Go ahead. Read the contract again, sweetheart. I am the court-appointed supervisor. I have a legal right to be on the premises to monitor operations. And since this is the best room in the house, this is where I am staying." He walked over to the bed, Grandma's bed, and flopped down on it, putting his feet up on the pristine white duvet. "Besides," he added, picking up a remote control, "you need us. You have no staff. I fired the old caretaker this morning. He was stealing supplies, or at least that is what I will tell the police if he tries to come back." I stared at him. He had fired Mr. Jenkins. Mr. Jenkins had worked here for 30 years. He was the only one who knew how to fix the boiler. "You fired the only staff member we have?" I asked, my voice rising. "I am hiring new people," Marcus said, turning on the TV. "Better people. Cheaper people. Now be a good manager and go get my luggage from the car. The movers are busy with Tiffany's couch." I turned around and walked out of the room. I needed air. I needed to think. I marched down the hallway past the pile of Grandma's belongings that they had tossed aside like garbage. I saw her favorite photo album, the leather cover scratched, lying under a pair of muddy boots. I picked it up, dusting it off gently, and hugged it to my chest. I walked out to the back deck, the cold mountain air hitting my face. I pulled out my phone. My thumb hovered over the contact for the local sheriff. I could have them removed for destruction of property. I could file a restraining order. But then I stopped. If I kicked them out now, they would sue. They would claim I was obstructing the supervisor. They would tie me up in court for months, and the 6-month clock would run out. I would lose the lodge. No. That was exactly what Marcus wanted. He wanted a fight. He wanted drama. I looked back through the glass doors. Tiffany was now directing the movers to hang a neon sign that said "Good Vibes Only" over the stone fireplace. Jamal was in the kitchen eating a sandwich he had made with food from my refrigerator. Marcus was upstairs desecrating my grandmother's sanctuary. They were comfortable. They were arrogant. They thought they had won. I put my phone away. I realized I did not need the police. I needed to let them dig their own graves. Every mistake they made, every dollar they wasted, every rule they broke was ammunition. I took a deep breath and walked back inside. Tiffany looked up, expecting a screaming match. "Put the couch in the corner," I said calmly. She blinked. "What?" I said, "Put the couch in the corner. It blocks the fire exit where you had it. And Marcus can have the master suite." Tiffany smirked triumphantly. "See? I told you she would fold." But I continued raising my voice so it carried upstairs. "Since we are strictly following the contract, let us be clear about roles. Marcus is the supervisor. You and Jamal are guests. However, the estate accounts are frozen until we generate revenue. That means no free meals, no room service, And if you want to stay in the master suite, the rate is $2,000 a night. I will deduct it from your future share of the inheritance if there is any. Marcus appeared at the top of the stairs. You cannot charge me rent. I am working here. Then work, I said, looking him dead in the eye. But since you fired the caretaker, we are short-staffed. So supervisor, the boiler is making a noise in the basement. And the toilets in the guest wing need scrubbing. If you want to supervise, start there. Marcus turned red. I am not scrubbing toilets. Then you are a guest, I said, walking towards my small office behind the front desk. And guests pay, or they work. Welcome to the team. I slammed the office door shut and locked it. I sat down at the desk, opening my laptop. I pulled up the new security camera feed I had installed remotely the day before. I watched on the screen as Marcus kicked the wall in frustration. I picked up the phone and dialed my assistant. Sarah, I said, I need you to find Mr. Jenkins. Offer him double his salary to come back, but tell him to stay out of sight for now. And order a new vanity for the master suite, the exact replica of the one in the photo I am sending you. I looked at the monitor. Tiffany was taking a selfie with her neon sign. And Sarah, I added, send a notice to the insurance company. Tell them we have high-risk occupants on site. I want everything documented, every scratch, every broken glass. Because when I am done with them, they are going to wish they had never set foot in this mountain. The sun had not even crested over the jagged peaks of the Rockies when the banging started. It was a rhythmic, demanding thud against my bedroom door that pulled me out of a restless sleep. I rolled over and checked the time on my phone. It was 4:45 in the morning. My body ached from scrubbing the guest wing toilets the night before, a task Marcus had graciously assigned to me while he sat in the lounge watching golf. The banging continued louder this time. Sophia, wake up, the service bell is ringing. I dragged myself out of bed and opened the door. Tiffany was standing there in a silk sleeping mask pushed up onto her forehead and a matching robe. She looked annoyed, tapping her foot on the hardwood floor. Finally, she sighed. I have been buzzing the kitchen intercom for 5 minutes. Do you not have a service standard here? I rubbed my eyes. Tiffany, it is 5 in the morning. The kitchen does not open until 7. She crossed her arms. Well, I am awake now, and I need my morning latte. Almond milk, sugar-free, vanilla, extra foam, and make sure the espresso is not burnt. I have an early morning yoga stream to do for my followers, and I need energy. Chop, chop. She turned on her heel and marched back towards the master suite, assuming I would follow. And the worst part was, I had to. If I refused, Marcus would log it as failure to provide basic guest services. It would go into his little black notebook that he kept in his pocket, documenting my incompetence for the 6-month review. I went down to the industrial kitchen. The stainless steel surfaces were cold, and the floor was freezing. I started the espresso machine, the loud grinding noise echoing in the empty lodge. As I frothed the almond milk, I thought about the team of baristas I usually managed at the St. Regis project in New York. They would have laughed to see Sophia Jenkins, the fixer, making a custom latte for an influencer who thought the capital of France was Europe. I carried the steaming cup up to the master suite. The door was ajar. I walked in to find Tiffany setting up a ring light in front of the fireplace. She had rearranged the furniture again, pushing Grandma's antique reading chair into a corner to make room for her yoga mat. Here is your coffee, I said, setting it down on a coaster to avoid ruining the wood. Tiffany did not look up. She was inspecting her reflection in her phone. Thanks. Oh, and Sophia, can we talk about your look? I paused. My look. She swiveled around, gesturing vaguely at my head. I was wearing my hair in its natural curls pulled back into a practical bun. It was how I always wore it when I was working. Your hair, Tiffany said, wrinkling her nose. It is just a bit much. A bit wild. We are trying to attract a high-end clientele here, right? Wealthy people. They might find that texture a little intimidating. Or unkempt. My blood ran cold. It was not the first time I had heard comments like this, but coming from her in my grandmother's house, it stung differently. My hair is clean and professional. Tiffany, I said, my voice steady. She laughed, a light, airy sound that lacked any warmth. I am just trying to help you, sweetie. Maybe straighten it. Or wear a wig. You know, something that looks less like you just rolled out of the jungle. It is scaring the aesthetic. Just a tip from someone who knows about branding. I bit the inside of my cheek so hard I tasted copper. I wanted to pour the scalding hot latte over her yoga mat. I wanted to tell her that my natural hair had sat in boardrooms with billionaires who respected me more in 5 minutes than anyone had ever respected her in her entire life. But I didn't. I simply nodded. I will take that under advisement, I said. Good, she said, finally, taking a sip of the coffee. Ugh, this foam is too airy. Do it better tomorrow. I walked out of the room, my hands shaking. I needed to scrub something. I needed to expend this energy before I exploded. But as I reached the landing, Jamal came out of the guest room he was occupying. He was holding a pile of clothes. Perfect timing, sis, he said, dropping the bundle into my arms. I need these pressed and cleaned by noon. We are going into town to check out the local clubs, and I need to look fresh. I looked down at the clothes. It was a bright red tracksuit with the Gucci logo plastered all over it. The washing machine is in the basement, Jamal, I said. You know how to use it. He scoffed. This is designer Sophia. You cannot put this in a machine. It needs to be hand-washed and steamed, dry clean only. And be careful, this suit costs $2,000. If you shrink it, you are buying me a new one. He patted my cheek, a condescending gesture that made my skin crawl. Thanks, sis. You are finally making yourself useful. I carried the bundle of clothes down to the laundry room. I threw them onto the sorting table. $2,000. I picked up the jacket. The fabric felt stiff synthetic. I turned it inside out and found the care tag. Made in China. 100% polyester. Do not iron. I let out a short, sharp laugh. It was a knockoff. A cheap counterfeit probably bought from a street vendor in Canal Street. Jamal was walking around acting like a king in a $20 suit. I did not hand wash it. I threw it in the industrial washing machine on the delicate cycle. I would clean it because I needed them to keep treating me like the help. I needed them to get comfortable. I needed them to believe that they had broken me. Because while they were busy playing master and commander, they were getting sloppy. They were talking openly in the hallways. They were leaving documents on the table. They were revealing their true selves. That night, the lodge was quiet. Marcus, Tiffany, and Jamal had gone into Aspen to find a bar using the cash Marcus had bullied out of the petty cash box I kept for emergencies. I waited until I saw the taillights of the rental car disappear down the driveway. Then I went to my car and opened the trunk. Inside was a black hard-shell case. I carried it inside and opened it on the kitchen table. It contained 6 high-definition pinhole cameras and high-gain microphones. These were not baby monitors you bought at a box store. These were casino-grade surveillance devices, the kind I used when I was investigating employee theft in high-security hotels. They were virtually undetectable. I moved through the lodge like a ghost. I installed one inside the smoke detector in the living room, where Marcus liked to take his phone calls. I placed another behind the vent in the kitchen, where Tiffany complained to her mother on the phone about how boring the mountains were. I hid one in the bookshelf of the library disguised as a screw on a hinge. And finally I placed one in the hallway outside the master suite. I would not invade their privacy inside the bedroom because that was illegal and I played by the book. But anything they said in the common areas was fair game. I wired them all to a secure encrypted server that only I could access. By the time headlights swept across the front windows at 2 a.m, I was back in my small room behind the front desk. I opened my laptop. 6 screens flickered to life. The audio was crystal clear. I watched as Marcus stumbled into the hallway leaning heavily on Jamal. "We need to sell this dump fast, Dad." Jamal was slurring. "I cannot stand her. Did you see how she looked at my suit? Like she knew." Marcus laughed, a wet, ugly sound. "Don't worry, son. I spoke to the guy today. He is getting the paperwork ready. We just need to push her a little harder, make her mess up, maybe turn off the hot water tomorrow while she is showering." I watched them on the screen, their faces distorted by the fisheye lens. They were plotting my demise in my own house. They thought I was asleep. They thought I was the poor defenseless sister who washed their fake clothes and made their coffee. I took a sip of water and typed a log entry into my case file. Day 7. Surveillance active. Subjects confirm intent to sabotage. Let them play their games. Let them treat me like a servant. Because the servant sees everything. And when the master falls, it is usually the servant who trips him. I closed the laptop, and for the first time since arriving, I slept soundly. The smell hit me the moment I walked through the front doors of the lodge on Tuesday afternoon. It was not the scent of pine and fresh linen that usually welcomed guests. It was the distinct acrid stench of burnt garlic and stale frying oil. My heart sank. We had a reservation that evening for the Aspen Business Council, a group of 12 influential local investors who had been patrons of my grandmother for decades. This dinner was our first real test to prove that the lodge was still operating at a high standard. I dropped my bag and sprinted toward the kitchen. I expected to see Chef Bernard, the elderly but brilliant French culinary artist, who had been with us for 15 years prepping his famous coq au vin. Instead, I found the kitchen in chaos. Dirty pans were piled high in the sink, and a cloud of gray smoke was hovering near the ceiling. And there, standing by the stove wearing a stained apron, was a man I had never seen before. He was overweight, sweating profusely, and flipping a burger patty with a cigarette dangling from his lip. I froze. "Who are you? And where is Chef Bernard?" Marcus stepped out of the pantry, chewing on a toothpick. He looked smug. "Oh, Bernard. I let him go this morning. He was costing us a fortune, Sophia. Do you know how much he spent on truffle oil? It was ridiculous. I made an executive decision as supervisor to cut overhead. I felt the blood drain from my face. You fired Bernard on the night of the business council dinner. Are you insane?" Marcus waved his hand dismissively. "Relax. This is Tony. He is an old friend of mine from back in the city. He used to run the kitchen at that sports bar on 4th Street. He knows how to feed a crowd for pennies on the dollar. We are pivoting, Sophia. Comfort food, that is what people want. Not fancy French nonsense." I looked at Tony. He winked at me, tapping ash onto the floor. "Don't worry, sweetheart. I got some frozen steaks thawing in the microwave. They are going to love it." Thawing in the microwave. The horror of that sentence nearly made me dizzy. "You cannot serve frozen microwaved steaks to the Aspen Business Council," I said, my voice rising. "These people are used to Michelin stars. You are going to destroy our reputation in one night." Marcus stepped closer, his voice dropping to a threatening growl. "The budget is cut, Sophia. If you want to make your 500,000, you need to stop spending like a princess." Tony stays. The menu changes. Deal with it. He walked out, leaving me with the smoking fryer and the confident incompetence of Chef Tony. I wanted to scream. I wanted to fire Tony on the spot. But Marcus had signed the contract. If I fired his hire without cause, he would claim I was sabotaging his supervision. I had to let this train wreck happen. I had to let the guests taste the disaster. 7 o'clock arrived. The dining room was filled with the soft murmur of conversation. The members of the business council looked expectant, adjusting their napkins. Marcus was circulating the room, shaking hands, playing the role of the charming host. I watched from the server station as the plates went out. It was humiliating. The Caesar salad was limp, drowning in bottled dressing that smelled like vinegar and chemicals. The steaks were gray, sitting in a pool of watery grease. The mashed potatoes were clearly instant with a texture like wallpaper paste. I saw Mrs. Higgins, the chairwoman of the council, take one bite of the steak. She chewed slowly, her face twisting in confusion. She spat it discreetly into her napkin. She caught Marcus's eye. "Mr. Brooks," she called out. Marcus rushed over, smiling broadly. "Is everything to your liking, Mrs. Higgins?" She pointed at the plate with her fork. "This meat is cold in the center, and it tastes rancid. Is this what Hattie's legacy has come to?" I watched Marcus's face change. He did not apologize. He did not take responsibility. He sighed, looking distraught, and pointed toward me. "I am so sorry, Mrs. Higgins. It is my daughter, Sophia. She insists on handling the supply orders. I told her to buy prime cuts, but she is trying to save money for herself. You know how the younger generation is. They do not understand quality. I tried to step in, but she is very stubborn. He threw me under the bus without blinking. The entire table turned to look at me. Their expressions ranged from disappointment to disgust. Tiffany, who was sitting at a corner table live streaming, zoomed her camera in on my face. Awkward Tiffany whispered to her followers, "My sister-in-law just poisoned the VIPs. This is why you need professionals, guys." That was the breaking point. They could insult my clothes, they could invade my space, but they would not insult my professional competence. I spent 10 years managing crisis situations in the most demanding hotels in the world. I knew how to fix a disaster. I walked over to the table. I did not look at Marcus. I looked directly at Mrs. Higgins. "Mrs. Higgins," I said, my voice calm and authoritative. "I apologize deeply. There has been a mix-up with the delivery service. Please allow me to rectify this immediately. I will personally prepare a new course for you. Give me 20 minutes. Marcus snorted. You are going to cook. What are you going to make, toast?" I ignored him. I turned to the waiters. "Clear these tables. Pour the vintage Cabernet from the reserve cellar on the house." I pushed through the swinging doors into the kitchen. Tony was sitting on a crate looking at his phone. "Get up," I said. He laughed. "Hey, boss lady, I did my best. The microwave is tricky." I walked over to his station. "Get out of my kitchen. Sit in the alley. Do not come back in until I say so." Something in my eyes must have terrified him, because he scrambled up and ran out the back door. I looked at the pantry. I had 20 minutes. I did not have truffle oil or prime beef, but I had fresh trout that Mr. Jenkins had caught that morning. I had a bag of almonds. I had fresh green beans and a lemon tree in the conservatory. I tied an apron over my blazer. I pulled my hair back tighter, and then I went to work. My hands moved on autopilot. It was a dance I hadn't performed in years, but the muscle memory was there from my training at the Cordon Bleu in Paris, a credential my family knew nothing about. I filleted the trout with surgical precision. I heated the pan until it was smoking hot, but this time with clarified butter, not cheap oil. I toasted the almonds. I blanched the beans so they stayed crisp and bright green. I whipped up a sauce with brown butter, lemon, and capers. The kitchen transformed. The smell of burning grease was replaced by the nutty, citrusy aroma of a perfect Meunier sauce. 15 minutes later, I lined up 12 plates. I plated the fish, garnishing it with fresh parsley. It looked simple, elegant, and perfect. I signaled the waiters. Service, I commanded. I walked back into the dining room as the plates were set down. The silence was heavy. Mrs. Higgins looked skeptical. She cut a piece of the fish and put it in her mouth. Marcus was standing in the corner, his arms crossed, waiting for me to fail. Mrs. Higgins closed her eyes. She hummed. "This," she said, opening her eyes. "This is exquisite. It is fresh. It is perfectly balanced." She looked at me, and for the first time, there was respect. "Sophia, I did not know you had this talent. This tastes exactly like the trout Hattie used to serve us 40 years ago." Marcus's jaw dropped. He looked at the plate, then at me. He looked furious. He had wanted a disaster. He had wanted them to walk out. "Thank you, Mrs. Higgins," I said. "Please enjoy the wine." The dinner was saved. The guests lingered until midnight, laughing and drinking. When the bill came, they tipped generously. But the night was not over. As the guests were leaving, I went to the back alley to throw out the garbage bags filled with Tony's frozen steaks. I heard voices near the loading dock. It was Marcus and Tony. I stopped in the shadows, pulling out my phone. I activated the voice recorder app. "You made me look like an idiot," Marcus hissed. "Hey, relax," Tony said. "I bought the cheap stuff like you said. Look, here is the receipt. I spent $200 on the food. You gave me $2,000 from the petty cash. That is $1,800 profit, just like we agreed." I heard the rustle of paper. "Here is your cut," Tony said. $900 for you. 900 for me. Easy money, Marcus. Who cares if the old lady didn't like it? We got paid. Marcus sighed. Yeah, well, we cannot pull this stunt again with the food. She is too sharp in the kitchen. We need a new angle. Just take the money and go. I will call you for the next job. Maybe we need some plumbing repairs that cost a fortune. I stopped recording. My heart was pounding against my ribs. Kickbacks, embezzlement. It was a felony. I waited for Tony to drive away before I stepped back inside. I walked past Marcus in the hallway. He was smelling the $900 in his pocket, looking pleased with himself despite the failed sabotage. Good night, Dad, I said. He jumped. Don't call me that. You got lucky tonight, Sophia. Don't think you are a chef just because you can fry a fish. I smiled. A cold, knowing smile. I am not a chef, Marcus. I am an auditor. And I count everything. I went to my room and uploaded the audio file to the secure server. I labeled it Evidence File Number 4. Then I opened a ghost email account I had created. I typed a short message. I attached a low-resolution photo of Marcus taking the cash from Tony. Subject: I know about the kickbacks. Message: you have until the 30th. I want my money or the authorities get the photos of what you did with the construction loans in Denver. And now the lodge money too. Tick-tock. I hit send. Down the hall in the master suite I heard a phone ping. Then I heard a curse word screamed so loud it echoed through the mountains. Marcus had just realized that his past was catching up with him, and he had no idea that the person tightening the noose was sitting just down the hall removing her makeup and getting ready for bed. The dinner was a victory, but the war was just getting interesting. Wednesday morning arrived with the sound of tires crushing gravel and the heavy slam of car doors. I was in the lobby reviewing the inventory list when I saw them. 3 white SUVs with the official seal of the state of Colorado emblazoned on the side, one from the Department of Health, one from the Fire Marshal, and one from the Building Code Enforcement Agency. It was an ambush, a coordinated full-scale raid designed to shut a business down permanently. I looked out the window and saw Marcus standing on the porch. He was wearing a fresh linen suit and holding a thick cigar. He waved at the officers as they approached, playing the role of the concerned citizen. Tiffany was right behind him, phone in hand, already live streaming the arrival. Guys, it is so sad, she whispered into her microphone. The authorities are here. We heard rumors about black mold and rats. I just hope everyone is safe. I took a sip of my black coffee. I did not panic. I did not run. In fact, I checked my watch. They were exactly on time. I walked out to the porch just as the lead inspector, a man with a crew cut and a clipboard named Officer Vance, marched up the steps. Are you Sophia Brooks? He asked, his voice booming. I am, I replied calmly, extending my hand. We received an anonymous tip, Officer Vance said, ignoring my hand. A very detailed tip regarding multiple code violations, including structural instability, expired fire suppression systems, and unsanitary food storage. We are here to conduct an immediate comprehensive inspection. If we find even one major violation, we are pulling your operating license and condemning the building. Marcus stepped forward, shaking his head theatrically. Oh dear, that sounds terrible, officer. As the court-appointed supervisor, I must say I have had my concerns. My daughter here is inexperienced. I have tried to tell her about the safety codes, but she just refuses to listen. Please do what you must. Safety first. He smirked at me. A cold, predatory smirk that said, checkmate. He thought he had me. He thought I was just a receptionist who did not know that commercial building codes in Aspen had been updated 6 months ago. He thought I had spent the last night sleeping. Please come in. Officer Vance, I said, stepping aside. We have nothing to hide. The next 2 hours were a masterclass in tension. The inspectors tore the lodge apart. They crawled into the attic looking for exposed wiring. They swabbed the kitchen counters looking for bacteria. They tested the pressure in the boiler. Marcus and Tiffany followed them like vultures waiting for a carcass. Every time an inspector frowned, Marcus would nod knowingly. See that he would whisper, I told you. Dilapidated. They reached the kitchen. This was where Marcus was sure he would win. After the disaster with Chef Tony the night before, he assumed the place was a health hazard. Officer Vance opened the walk-in freezer. He checked the temperature logs. He checked the expiration dates on the milk. He ran a white glove over the ventilation hood. He turned to me. "Miss Brooks, where are your hazard analysis and critical control point records?" Marcus chuckled. "She does not even know what that means, officer. She probably thinks it is a type of French sauce." I walked over to the manager's desk in the corner. I pulled out a 3-inch thick red binder. "Here you go, officer," I said. "I updated the HACCP plan last night to reflect the new menu. You will also find the daily temperature logs for the last 3 years verified by a third-party auditor. And in the blue tab are the certifications for the new fire suppression system I had installed remotely 2 days before I arrived." Officer Vance took the binder. He flipped through the pages. His eyebrows went up. He looked at the certificates. He looked at the logs. Everything was color-coded, time-stamped, and compliant with ISO 9001 standards. It was the kind of documentation you would find at a Ritz-Carlton, not a family lodge. He closed the binder. "This is impressive," he muttered. "I have never seen paperwork this thorough." Marcus's smile faltered. "What are you talking about?" "Check the pipes. I heard the pipes rattling." And the basement. I am sure there is mold in the basement." Officer Vance looked at Marcus. "We checked the basement, sir. It is dry, and the pipes are brand new copper." He turned back to me. "Miss Brooks, I apologize for the intrusion. It appears your facility is in excellent condition, better than most 5-star hotels in the valley. We will be marking this complaint as unfounded." Tiffany lowered her phone. "Wait, so you are not shutting her down? But what about the rats? My father said there were rats." Officer Vance narrowed his eyes. "Filing a false report is a crime, ma'am. I suggest you be careful with your accusations." I smiled. "Thank you, officer. Would you like a coffee for the road?" Officer Vance nodded. "That would be nice." As I turned to go to the coffee machine, Officer Vance stopped. He sniffed the air. "Do I smell tobacco smoke?" he asked. Marcus was standing near the back door, leaning against the frame, puffing on his Cuban cigar. He looked annoyed that his plan had failed, but he was still trying to look like the boss. Officer Vance marched over to Marcus. "Sir, are you smoking in a commercial food preparation area?" Marcus rolled his eyes. "Relax, buddy. The inspection is over, and I am the supervisor. I can smoke where I want." Officer Vance pointed to a bright yellow sign I had affixed to the doorframe at 4 o'clock that morning. It was brand new and impossible to miss. "No smoking. Oxygen storage area. Violators subject to maximum state fines." Marcus looked at the sign. Then he looked at the red tanks of emergency oxygen. I had moved into the utility closet next to him just hours ago. Officer Vance pulled out his ticket book. "Sir, you are smoking a combustible material within 5 feet of pressurized oxygen tanks in a commercial facility. That is a Class 1 fire violation." Marcus dropped the cigar and stomped on it. "I did not know. She put that sign up just now. It is a setup." "Ignorance of the law is no excuse, sir," Officer Vance said, writing furiously. "And stomping it out on the floor is another violation, destruction of evidence." He ripped the ticket off the pad and handed it to Marcus. "That is a $5,000 fine payable to the state of Colorado within 30 days. If not paid, you will face a mandatory court appearance and potential jail time. Have a nice day." Officer Vance tipped his cap to me and walked out. The silence in the kitchen was absolute. Tiffany was staring at her father, her mouth open. Jamal had retreated to the hallway. Marcus held the ticket, his hands shaking. His face turned a shade of purple I had never seen before. $5,000. He did not have $5,000. I knew his bank account balance was negative $300. He turned to me slowly. "You set me up. You moved those tanks. You put up that sign." I leaned against the stainless steel counter, crossing my arms. "I am just following safety protocols, Supervisor. You said safety first, right? I would hate for the lodge to burn down because of your bad habits. Marcus crumbled the ticket in his fist. He took a step toward me, his eyes filled with a raw, dangerous hate. You think you are smart, he hissed. You think this is a game. You just declared war, Sophia. You want to play by the rules. Fine. I will show you what happens when I stop playing nice. I am going to bury you. I am going to make sure you lose this place even if I have to burn it down myself. He stormed out, kicking the back door open. Tiffany ran after him, crying about how the live stream had captured the whole thing. I stood alone in the pristine kitchen. My hands were trembling slightly, not from fear but from adrenaline. I had won this battle. I had used his own weapon, the law, against him. But as I watched him storm toward his rental car, kicking the tires, I knew he was right about one thing. This was no longer just a family squabble. It was a war, and a wounded animal is always the most dangerous. I needed to be ready because the next attack would not be a phone call to the authorities. It would be something much darker. I picked up the phone and dialed Mr. Jenkins. Bring the crew back, I said, and hire night security. Armed. The game had just changed, and I was done playing defense. Thursday night did not fall gently over the Hattie Mountain Lodge. Usually the evenings here were defined by the sound of wind whistling through the Douglas firs and the crackle of the fireplace. But tonight, the mountain air was vibrating with the heavy synthetic bass of electronic dance music. It was Tiffany's 27th birthday, or as she had been announcing all week, her birthday month celebration. I stood on the second-floor landing, hidden in the shadows of the mezzanine, looking down at the Great Hall. My grandmother's sanctuary had been transformed into a cheap nightclub. Tiffany had invited about 30 of her closest friends, which meant 30 random influencers she knew from Instagram, who would travel anywhere for free alcohol. They were everywhere. Girls in sequined mini dresses were dancing on the antique Persian rugs in their stilettos. Guys in skinny jeans and oversized t-shirts were vaping openly, blowing clouds of strawberry-scented smoke into the air that mingled with the smell of spilled vodka. The neon sign Tiffany had installed over the fireplace was flashing pink, casting a garish light over the hand-carved timber beams. I gripped the railing, my knuckles turning white. Every instinct in my body screamed at me to go down there and throw them out. This was the room where my grandfather had taught me to play chess. This was the room where we drank cocoa on Christmas Eve. Seeing it desecrated like this felt like a physical blow. But I did not move. I did not scream. Instead, I lifted my phone and pressed record. I had to remind myself of the long game. Marcus was the supervisor. Under the contract, he was responsible for the maintenance and safety of the property. Every stain on the rug, every burn mark on the table, and every unauthorized guest was a breach of his fiduciary duty. I was not just watching a party, I was collecting evidence for a lawsuit. I zoomed in on the center of the room. Tiffany was standing on top of the oak coffee table, a piece of furniture that had been in our family for 80 years. She was holding a bottle of champagne, shaking it violently. "Happy birthday to me," she screamed, spraying the sticky liquid all over the room. Her friends cheered, raising their red Solo cups. The champagne soaked into the velvet armchairs and dripped onto the floor, but Tiffany did not care. She was living for the lens of the camera her friend was pointing at her. Then I saw Jamal. He was stumbling out of the hallway that led to the wine cellar. My stomach dropped. The cellar was locked. I had the only key. But as I zoomed in on the door, I saw the wood around the lock was splintered. He had kicked it in. In his hand was a dusty, dark green bottle. Even from this distance, I recognized the label. It was a 1982 Chateau Margaux, my grandfather's prized possession. A bottle worth at least $3,000. A bottle we were saving for a wedding or a birth. Jamal staggered into the middle of the room, holding the bottle up like a trophy. "Look what I found in the dungeon," he shouted, slurring his words. "Vintage, baby. This stuff is probably older than me." "No," I whispered to myself. "Please don't." Tiffany hopped down from the table. "Open it, let me taste. I bet it tastes like old grape juice." Jamal struggled with the cork, tearing the foil off with his teeth. He did not have a corkscrew, so he used a pocket knife, hacking away at the vintage cork until it crumbled into the wine. He spat out a piece of cork and took a swig directly from the bottle. He grimaced. Ugh, it is dry. It tastes like dirt. Who drinks this stuff? He handed the bottle to a girl next to him. Here, mix it with some Diet Coke. Make it a calamazzo. I felt a tear slide down my cheek. They were mixing a $3,000 Bordeaux with diet soda. It was not just wasteful, it was sacrilegious. It was the ultimate symbol of their ignorance and their greed. They did not value anything they could not put a price tag on or show off on social media. But then the conversation shifted, and I steadied my hand, focusing the microphone on Jamal. He had his arm around a guy I recognized as a local club promoter. "This place is crazy, man," the promoter yelled over the music. "Your sister owns this." Jamal laughed, leaning in close. His voice was loud and reckless, fueled by the stolen wine. "She thinks she owns it. We are just letting her play house for a few weeks. My dad has a buyer lined up in Denver, a developer. They're going to tear this dusty old cabin down and build luxury condos." The promoter raised his eyebrows. "Condos. That is big money." "Huge money," Jamal bragged. "We are talking 10 million for the land. As soon as Sophia misses her revenue target or quits, we sign the papers. 2 weeks tops, man. Then I am buying a Lambo." I saved the video. There it was. A confession. They had no intention of running the business. They were actively conspiring to sell the land for development, which was a direct violation of Grandma Hattie's will. She had stipulated that the land must remain a nature preserve. If I could prove they intended to develop it, I could have Marcus removed as executor of the estate entirely. Just as I was about to retreat to my room, a loud crash echoed through the hall, silencing the music for a split second. I looked down. Near the fireplace, a large blue and white porcelain vase lay in jagged shards on the stone hearth. It was a Ming Dynasty replica my grandmother had brought back from Hong Kong in the 60s. It was appraised at $20,000. A girl in a sequined dress was standing over it, looking bored. "Oops," she giggled. "I barely touched it. It was in the way." Tiffany walked over, kicking a shard of porcelain under the rug. "Don't worry about it, babe. It was ugly anyway. We needed to redecorate. Just get another drink." The music blasted back on. They went back to dancing on the grave of my family's history. I walked back to my room, my heart cold and hard as a diamond. I uploaded the video files to the secure server. I labeled them "Destruction of Property and Conspiracy to Defraud." I did not sleep that night. I listened to the bass until 4 in the morning, when the last guest finally passed out or drove away. At 6 in the morning, the sun rose over the mountains, illuminating the carnage. I walked out into the great hall. It smelled of stale beer vomit and regret. There were cigarette burns on the carpet. The broken vase was still scattered across the hearth. The empty bottle of Chateau Margaux was lying on its side, sticky with soda. I stood there in my robe, holding a cup of coffee. I could have called the cleaners. I could have started scrubbing. That is what the old Sophia would have done. The fixer. The one who cleans up messes. But not today. Today, at 8 in the morning, Mrs. Vander Woodson was coming. She was the most exclusive wedding planner in Colorado. I had spent weeks convincing her to consider the lodge as a venue for her winter luxury package. A contract with her would be worth $200,000, nearly half of my target revenue. I heard footsteps upstairs. Marcus was stumbling out of the master suite wearing his robe, looking hungover. He looked down at the mess and rubbed his eyes. "Good God," he groaned. "What happened? Where is the maid? Sophia, get a broom. Clean this up." I took a sip of my coffee. "No," I said calmly. Marcus blinked. "What did you say?" I said no. "I am the manager, not the janitor. And according to the contract, you are responsible for the condition of the common areas. This is your mess, Marcus. You clean it." He started to yell, but then the doorbell rang. The heavy oak door swung open. Standing there was Mrs. Vander Woodson, impeccable in a cream cashmere coat, holding a clipboard. Behind her were 2 potential brides looking for a venue. They looked at the vomit on the rug. They looked at the broken glass. They smelled the stale alcohol. And then they looked at Marcus, who was standing on the balcony looking like a disheveled tyrant. Mrs. Vanderwoodson's lip curled in disgust. Miss Brooks, she said, her voice icy. I was under the impression this was a luxury establishment. It appears I was misinformed. This looks like a fraternity house. Marcus ran down the stairs, almost tripping over a red Solo cup. Wait. We had a little event last night. A charity gala. We are just cleaning up. Mrs. Vanderwoodson stepped over a puddle of sticky liquid. A charity gala, she repeated, looking at the neon good vibes only sign that was hanging crookedly. It looks more like a disaster zone. Come, ladies. I think the Four Seasons is more our speed. She turned and walked out. The two brides followed, casting horrified looks at the broken vase. I watched them go. I watched $200,000 walk out the door. My heart ached for the loss of the business. But then I looked at Marcus. He was standing in the middle of the trash, pale and shaking. He knew what had just happened. He knew that I had let it happen. I pulled out my phone and took a photo of him standing amidst the ruin. That goes in the file too, I whispered. Marcus turned to me, his eyes wide. You let her leave. You lost the contract on purpose. You are sabotaging your own revenue. I smiled. Sometimes you have to lose a battle to win the war, Marcus. You just proved to a court of law that you are unfit to supervise a lemonade stand, let alone a multi-million-dollar estate. I turned and walked back to my office, leaving him alone with the smell of stale champagne and the realization that his daughter was no longer playing by his rules. The party was over, but the hangover was going to last a lifetime. The morning sun did nothing to brighten the mood in the Hattie Mountain Lodge. It only served to illuminate the destruction in high definition. I sat in my small office behind the front desk, the rhythmic hum of the laser printer serving as the only soundtrack to my anger. I was not just printing documents. I was printing an indictment. I collated the pages into a neat stack. Page 1, a quote from a restoration specialist for the antique Persian rug soaked in champagne and vomit. $12,000. Page 2, the appraisal for the Ming Dynasty replica vase. $20,000. Page 3, the current market value of the 1982 Chateau Margaux. $3,500. Page 4, the lost revenue from the wedding contract we had blown. $200,000. I stapled the packet together with a satisfying crunch. The grand total came to nearly $250,000 in damages and lost opportunity. I walked out into the great hall. The smell of stale alcohol had been replaced by the chemical scent of industrial carpet cleaner thanks to the emergency crew I had hired at double the rate. Marcus was sitting in one of the few surviving leather armchairs wearing sunglasses indoors. He was nursing a Bloody Mary, his hand shaking slightly as he lifted the glass to his lips. I tossed the document onto his lap. He flinched, spilling a drop of tomato juice on his robe. What is this? He grumbled, not looking up. It is an invoice, Marcus, I said, leaning against the heavy oak table. For the party. Since you are the supervisor and you sanctioned the event, you are liable for the damages. Marcus picked up the stack of papers. He flipped through them, his lip curling in a sneer. You cannot be serious. You are charging me for the rug. It was old anyway. And the wine. Jamal said it tasted like vinegar. I pointed to the bottom line. You owe the estate $235,000. Payable immediately. If not, I will deduct it from the estate's value before any inheritance is calculated. Which means even if you win, you are starting with a massive debt. Marcus laughed, a dry, humorless sound. He stood up, swaying slightly, and ripped the invoice in half. Then, he ripped it again. He threw the confetti of paper into the air. Paperwork, Sophia. It is all just paper. You think a judge is going to care about a rug when I sell this place for millions? You are delusional. He stepped closer, invading my personal space. The smell of vodka and desperation was overpowering. You are trying to scare me with bills, he hissed. But I am not scared, because I know something you do not. I know that you are weak. I saw your face when that wedding planner walked out. You are crumbling. You are going to quit. And when you do, I will burn every invoice you ever printed. He pushed past me, heading toward the stairs. I am going to take a nap. Do not disturb me unless you are bringing me the surrender papers. I watched him go. He was confident. Too confident for a man who had just lost a fortune. He was not acting like a man who hoped to sell. He was acting like a man who had already sold. That night, the lodge was silent. Tiffany and Jamal had gone into town again, using Tiffany's credit card this time, since I had locked down the petty cash. Marcus, however, had stayed behind. I waited until 2 in the morning. I crept up the stairs, my socks moving silently on the wood. The door to the master suite was ajar. I could hear the heavy rhythmic snoring of my father. I slipped inside. The room smelled of expensive cologne and sweat. Marcus was passed out on the bed, fully clothed. On the nightstand next to an empty bottle of scotch sat his laptop. It was open. My heart hammered against my ribs. This was risky. If he woke up, he could claim I was violating his privacy. He could have me arrested. But I needed to know why he was so arrogant. I needed to know who the buyer was. I moved the mouse. The screen flickered to life. Password required. I paused. Marcus was not a complex man. I tried his birthday. Incorrect. I tried his social security number. Incorrect. Then I remembered his vanity. I typed in Big Boss 1. Access granted. I almost rolled my eyes. He was so predictable. I quickly navigated to his email. I scanned the inbox. Most of it was spam, overdue notices from credit card companies, and angry emails from Tiffany asking for money. But then I saw a folder labeled Aspen Project. I opened it. There was only one email inside from a sender named Viper LLC. The subject line was Contract Finalization. I opened the attachment. It was a purchase agreement for the Hattie Mountain Lodge. I scanned the legalese, my eyes widening with every paragraph. The purchase price was listed at $3 million. That was nearly $2 million below market value. Why would Marcus sell so low? Then I found the addendum. Consulting fee payable to Marcus Brooks upon closing, $1.5 million, to be paid in cryptocurrency to an offshore account in the Cayman Islands. He was undercutting the family estate to get a personal kickback. He was stealing from his own mother's legacy to pay his debts. But it got worse. I scrolled down to the buyer's information. Viper LLC was a shell company. I quickly opened a new tab and ran a search on the company's registration number using my forensic accounting software. The results loaded in seconds. Viper LLC was a subsidiary of a construction firm based in New Jersey, a firm that was currently under federal investigation for money laundering and ties to organized crime. The owner, Giovanni Moretti, was not a developer. He was a loan shark who needed a place to wash dirty money. I felt a chill run down my spine. Marcus was not selling to a developer. He was selling to the mob, and the clause at the bottom of the contract made my blood freeze. Buyer reserves the right to demolish existing structures immediately upon possession to facilitate subterranean construction. They were going to tear down the lodge. They were going to destroy everything Grandma Hattie had built to build. What? A bunker, a safe house, a casino. It did not matter. I pulled a USB drive from my pocket and copied the files. I also downloaded his browser history, which showed searches for how to evict family members and untreatable poisons. I stared at his sleeping form. He was not just a bad father. He was a criminal. He was willing to sell our history to gangsters just to save his own skin. Suddenly, Marcus shifted. He groaned and rolled over. His hand flopped onto the nightstand inches from the laptop. I froze. I held my breath. He smacked his lips, muttered something unintelligible, and settled back into a deep sleep. I gently pulled the USB drive out. I closed the laptop exactly as I had found it. I slipped out of the room, my legs shaking. I ran back to my office and locked the door. I leaned against it, gasping for air. I had the smoking gun. I had the proof that he was defrauding the estate. But I could not use it yet. If I went to the police now, the investigation would freeze the assets. The lodge would be wrapped in red tape for years. I needed to trap him. I needed him to sign that document. I needed him to commit the crime in front of witnesses so I could take him down instantly and permanently. The next morning, I was in the kitchen pretending to make coffee when Marcus walked in. He looked terrible. His eyes were bloodshot and his hands were trembling. He poured himself a mug of black coffee and leaned against the counter. "I am tired of this game, Sophia," he said, his voice raspy. "So am I." "Marcus," I replied, not looking at him. He pulled out his phone. He dialed a number. He did not put it on speaker, but the kitchen was quiet enough that I could hear the ringtone. "Hello?" A deep voice answered on the other end. "It is Marcus," my father said. I paused, turning my back to him so he could not see me listening. "Is it done?" the voice asked. "Not yet," Marcus whispered. "But we are close. She is breaking. I saw her crying in the office this morning." I had not been crying. I had been laughing at a meme my assistant sent me. But Marcus saw what he wanted to see. "Good," the voice said. "Because my partners are getting impatient. You have 3 days, Marcus. Or we collect the debt in other ways. Do you understand?" "I understand," Marcus said, sweat beading on his forehead. "Shuk tiendi. Proceed with the paperwork. She is going to quit by Friday, I guarantee it." He hung up. He looked at me, his eyes full of panic and malice. "You should pack your bags, Sophia," he said. "I have a feeling this week is going to be very difficult for you." I turned around and smiled, a genuine bright smile. "We will see, Marcus," I said. "We will see." He walked out, thinking he had just threatened me. He did not know that he had just confirmed his own execution date. He had 3 days. I had a USB drive and a plan, and unlike him, I did not have a mob boss breathing down my neck. I only had the ghost of my grandmother, and I knew she was cheering me on. Friday arrived with a suffocating heaviness. The air in the lodge felt thick like the calm before a tornado touches down. Marcus had stopped yelling. He had stopped kicking walls and throwing invoices. Instead, he moved through the house with a quiet, terrifying purpose. He was no longer trying to bully me into submission with threats. He had realized that I did not fear his anger. So he decided to use the only weapon he had left, my heart, or at least the parts of it he thought were still vulnerable. I was sitting in the conservatory trying to read a book, but my eyes kept darting to the clock. I knew the deadline Marcus had been given by the mob was closing in. He was desperate, and desperate men do despicable things. The glass door slid open. Marcus walked in. He was not holding a golf club or a cigar. He was holding his phone. His face was softened into a mask of paternal concern that looked so unnatural it made my skin crawl. "Sophia," he said softly, "your mother wants to speak to you." I froze. My mother. I had not spoken to her in 3 years, not since she chose to side with Marcus during the divorce, taking a settlement that left her comfortable while she watched him disown me. She was a woman who had spent her entire life making herself small to fit into Marcus's shadow. I took the phone. My hand was trembling slightly. "Hello, Sophia baby, is that you?" Her voice was thin and shaky. It sounded like she had been crying. "Hi, Mom." "Oh, Sophia, I am so glad you picked up. Your father told me everything. He told me how stressed you are, how you are struggling with that big old house all by yourself." I looked at Marcus. He was watching me closely, his eyes hard and calculating. He was directing this call. "I am fine, Mom. I am handling it." "Are you really?" She sniffled. "Marcus says you look exhausted. He says you are fighting everyone." "Sophia, please. I cannot sleep thinking about you up there alone. We are a family. We are supposed to help each other. Your father loves you so much. He just wants to take the burden off your shoulders. He loves me." The words tasted like ash. "Mom, did he tell you he tried to sell the lodge to a money launderer? Did he tell you he embezzled from the estate?" There was a pause on the line. A long, suffocating silence. Then I heard Marcus whisper something in the background. "Sophia, stop it." Her voice cracked. "Why do you always have to be so difficult? Why can't you just let him help? If you don't sign the papers, he says, He says the stress might kill him. He has a bad heart, Sophia. Do you want that on your conscience? Do you want to kill your father? I closed my eyes. They were weaponizing her weakness. They were using my mother as a human shield. I am sorry, Mom. I have to go. I hung up before she could say anything else. I handed the phone back to Marcus. That was low, Marcus. Even for you. He shrugged, slipping the phone into his pocket. She is worried about you. We all are. Before I could respond, Tiffany walked in. She was wearing a loose flowing dress instead of her usual tight designer gear. She was holding a cup of herbal tea. She looked pale. Sophia, can we talk? Her voice was small. Gone was the arrogant influencer. In her place was a scared young woman. She sat down opposite me, placing a hand protectively over her stomach. I was not going to tell anyone yet, she whispered, tears welling up in her eyes. It is too early. But with everything going on, I feel like I have to. She looked at Marcus, then at me. I am pregnant, Sophia. The room went silent. Marcus feigned shock, covering his mouth. Oh my God. A grandchild. Tiffany, is that true? Tiffany nodded, a tear rolling down her cheek. Yes. I found out the morning we arrived. That is why I have been so emotional. That is why I have been snapping at you, Sophia. I am just so scared. Jamal and we don't have anywhere to live. The studio apartment in the city is too small for a baby. We are broke. She reached out and took my hand. Her palms were clammy. This money, the money from the lodge sale. It was going to be for the baby, for his education, for his future. If we don't sell, Jamal is going to have to take that job at the warehouse. He will never be home. I will be raising this child alone in poverty. She squeezed my hand. Do you want your niece or nephew to be born on the street, Sophia? Do you want to punish an innocent child just because you hate us? Jamal appeared in the doorway, looking down at his shoes. He had clearly been coached on his blocking. It is true, sis, he mumbled. I want to be a good dad, but I need a start. Dad said if we sell the lodge, he will set up a trust fund for the kid. Please, don't take this away from us. I looked at them. The tableau of the desperate family, the grieving father, the expecting mother, the repentant brother. It was a performance worthy of an Academy Award. But I noticed something. I noticed the way Tiffany's hand kept drifting to her stomach only when I was looking. I noticed that the herbal tea she was holding was actually steaming with the distinct smell of the caffeinated breakfast blend I brewed this morning. And I remembered the bottle of vodka she had been drinking from just 2 nights ago at her party. She was not pregnant, she was desperate. But I knew that if I called her a liar now, they would just deny it. They would paint me as a monster who attacked a pregnant woman. I needed them to think I had broken. I needed them to think their gaslighting had worked. I let my shoulders slump. I let the exhaustion I had been holding back wash over my face. I pulled my hand away from Tiffany and covered my face. I didn't know. Tiffany leaned in. Now you know. So please, Sophia, be the bigger person. Be the aunt this baby needs. Just sign the transfer. Let Dad take over. You can go back to New York. You can go back to your life. No more fighting. I stayed silent for a long time. I let the silence stretch until Marcus started to fidget. I am so tired, I whispered. Marcus stepped closer. I know, honey. I know. Just let go. I looked up at them. My eyes were dry, but I made sure my voice sounded hollow. You win. I cannot do this anymore. I do not want to be the reason. I do not want to hurt the baby. Marcus let out a breath he had been holding. A look of pure predatory triumph flashed across his face before he masked it with relief. Thank you, Sophia. You are doing the right thing. I stood up slowly, leaning on the table, as if I could barely support my own weight. I will sign the papers. But I have one condition. Marcus narrowed his eyes. What condition? I want to do it properly. I want to sign the transfer at the gala tomorrow night. In front of everyone. I want to leave with my head held high. I want people to know I am giving it to you willingly for the sake of the family. Not because I failed. Tiffany clapped her hands. That is a great idea, a handover ceremony. It will be great content. The reconciliation. My followers will love it. Marcus hesitated. He was suspicious, but his greed was louder than his instincts. He had 3 days. Tomorrow night was perfect. Fine, he said. Tomorrow night. We will announce it at the dinner. I will have the notary there. I nodded and walked toward the door. I walked slowly, dragging my feet. Thank you, Sophia. Tiffany called out, sipping her caffeinated tea. You are saving us. I walked into the hallway and turned the corner. The moment I was out of sight, I straightened my back. The exhaustion vanished. The hollow look in my eyes was replaced by cold steel. I walked into my office and locked the door. I pulled out my phone and texted my lawyer. They took the bait. Prepare the projection system, and get the sheriff on standby for tomorrow night at 9 p.m. I looked at the monitor where Tiffany was now high-fiving Jamal, laughing about how easy it was to fool me. Enjoy your victory lap, I whispered, because tomorrow night you are going to find out that the baby card was the last card in your deck. And I am holding a royal flush. Saturday morning arrived with a sky the color of bruised steel. It was the kind of day that usually signaled a storm coming in over the Rockies, but today, the turbulence was entirely man-made. I spent an extra hour in my room staring at my reflection in the mirror, practicing the face of defeat. I let my shoulders slump forward. I stopped wearing concealer under my eyes to let the dark circles show. I pulled my hair back into a loose, messy bun that suggested I had given up on trying to impress anyone. When I finally walked down the grand staircase into the lobby, Marcus was already there. He was pacing back and forth on the Persian rug, wearing a path into the wool. He was checking his watch every 30 seconds. When he saw me, he stopped. His eyes were wide, filled with a mixture of hope and suspicion. Well, he asked, his voice tight. I walked over to the fireplace and leaned against the stone mantel, letting out a long, shaky sigh. You were right, Dad, I whispered. My voice broke perfectly on the last word. Marcus took a step closer, but he didn't touch me. He was afraid to spook the horse right before it entered the stable. Right about what, Sophia? About everything, I said, looking down at my shoes. I am not cut out for this. The pressure, the inspections, the broken pipes, the staff. It is too much. I haven't slept in 3 days. I am drowning, Marcus, and I just want to go home. The relief that washed over his face was so intense it was almost grotesque. His shoulders dropped 3 inches. A smile spread across his face, revealing his teeth like a shark sensing blood in the water. I told you, honey, he said, his voice dripping with fake sympathy. I told you running a place like this takes a certain kind of grit. It is not for everyone. You are a city girl. You belong in an office, not fighting with boilers and bears. He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a folded document. He had been carrying the transfer papers with him every single day, just waiting for this moment. We can end this right now, he said, uncapping a pen. Just sign here and you can be on a plane back to New York by this afternoon. I will handle the debts. I will handle the repairs. You will be free. I looked at the pen. I reached for it and then I pulled my hand back. No, I said. Marcus froze. What do you mean, no? You just said you wanted to quit. I do, I said, looking up at him with tear-filled eyes. But I cannot just sign it on a coffee table like a shameful secret. If I do that, everyone will say I failed. They will say Sophia Brooks ran away because she was incompetent. They will say you forced me out. Marcus frowned. Who cares what they say? You will be rich, well, comfortable. I care, I said, my voice strengthening just a fraction. I have a professional reputation, Marcus. If I leave in disgrace, I lose my clients in New York. I need this to look like a strategic family decision, a passing of the torch. I took a deep breath. I want a ceremony. Marcus blinked. A ceremony, yes. Tonight. You already have the investors coming from Denver, right? The ones you have been talking to. Marcus went pale. How do you know about them? I shrugged. Jamal mentioned you were looking for partners to help expand. If they are going to be the new owners or partners, I want to sign the transfer in front of them. I want to do it at a gala dinner. We will invite the remaining staff, Mrs. Vanderwoodson, even though she hates us and anyone else of importance. I paused, letting the hook sink in. And I want it live streamed on the lodge's official social media and Tiffany's channel. Marcus narrowed his eyes. Why live stream it? Because I want to make a speech, I lied smoothly. I want to publicly thank you for stepping in to save the legacy. I want to announce to the world that the Brooks family is united. That way when I leave with honor. And you look like the hero who saved the day. I saw the gears turning in his head. Marcus Brooks, the hero. Marcus Brooks, the savior of the estate. His ego was inflating before my eyes, pushing out any remaining suspicion. He imagined the comments section praising him. He imagined his creditors seeing him take control of a multi-million-dollar asset live on the internet. Fine, he said, slapping the paper onto the table. We do it your way. A gala. Tonight at 8 o'clock. But Sophia, if you try anything... I raised my hands in surrender. What could I try, Marcus? I am giving you exactly what you want. The keys to the kingdom. He smiled. A cold, victorious smile. Good girl. Finally using your brain. The next 6 hours were a blur of chaotic energy. Marcus was on the phone constantly barking orders at caterers he found on Craigslist because no reputable vendor would take his credit card. He called his contacts at Viper LLC, telling them to get to Aspen by sundown. It is happening, he whispered into the phone, his back turned to me. Bring the contract. We sign the transfer, then we sign the sale immediately after. 2 birds, 1 stone. Yeah, bring the champagne. I sat in my office pretending to pack my personal belongings into a cardboard box. In reality, I was checking the server status. The cameras in the dining room were fully operational. The audio feed was crisp. I had sent the link to the private stream to my lawyer, the district attorney, and the state police. I walked out to the lobby around 5 in the afternoon. The transformation was happening, but not in the way a normal person would expect. They weren't cleaning up the mess from the party. They were just covering it up. Tiffany was directing Jamal to throw heavy blankets over the stained furniture. Just cover the wine stains, she said. Nobody will notice in the dim light. We want it to look moody and atmospheric. She spotted me and squealed, clapping her hands. Sophia, this is going to be epic. I posted the teaser an hour ago. The big announcement. People are already tuning in. We are going to go viral. She grabbed my arm and pulled me toward the stairs. Come on, you have to see what I'm wearing. Since you are leaving, I figured I should look the part of the new lady of the house. I followed her up to the master suite. The room was a disaster zone of clothes, shoes, and makeup. Lying on the bed was a gold sequined gown that looked like it belonged on a red carpet, or perhaps a very expensive Vegas showgirl. I ordered it express delivery, Tiffany said, stroking the fabric. It cost $3,000, but Dad said to put it on the lodge's account since we are owners now. She held the dress up against her body, spinning around in front of the full-length mirror. Look at me, Sophia. I look like a queen. The Queen of Aspen. Once we sell this place, Jamal and I are going to buy a mansion in Los Angeles. I'm going to have a reality show. This is just the pilot episode. She looked at my reflection in the mirror. I was wearing my plain gray sweater and jeans. You know, she said, her voice dripping with condescension, you should probably wear something nice too. Not that. You don't want to look like the poor relative next to me. Maybe you have a black dress somewhere. Something slimming. I looked at her. I looked at the delusion dancing in her eyes. She really believed it. She believed that in 3 hours she would be rich, famous, and powerful. She had no idea that the dress she was holding was evidence of embezzlement. She had no idea that the man she called Dad was selling her future to the mob. I have a dress, Tiffany, I said quietly. Don't worry about me. She turned back to her reflection, admiring her profile. Good. Just make sure your speech is short. Nobody wants to hear you ramble. This night is about us, the winners. I walked out of the room, leaving her to her fantasy. I went to my own small room and locked the door. I reached under my bed and pulled out a garment bag I had brought with me from New York. I unzipped it. Inside was not a black dress for mourning. It was a midnight blue power suit tailored to perfection in Milan. It was the suit I wore when I hostilely took over a corrupt board of directors in London. It was my armor. I checked my phone. One new message from the sheriff. Units are in position, waiting for your signal. I typed back. 8:30 p.m. When he signs. I sat down on the edge of the bed and waited. The house was vibrating with the excitement of the predators preparing for their feast. Marcus was downstairs instructing the waiters to pour cheap sparkling wine into expensive bottles. Tiffany was upstairs putting on her war paint. Jamal was probably rehearsing his speech about visionary leadership. They were all playing their parts perfectly in the tragedy I had written for them. They thought it was a coronation. They did not know it was an execution. I stood up and smoothed the front of my shirt. "Showtime," I whispered. I opened the door and stepped out into the hallway. The music from downstairs was starting to play. A slow, ominous jazz track that felt fitting for the end of the world. I began my descent down the stairs, ready to surrender everything except the truth. 8 o'clock struck with the heavy resonance of a grandfather clock echoing through a mausoleum. The great hall of the Hattie Mountain Lodge had been transformed, but not into the elegant venue I had pitched to wedding planners. It looked like a film set for a low-budget gangster movie. The dim lighting, which Tiffany claimed was for ambiance, was actually serving a dual purpose. It hid the wine stains on the Persian rugs from her party 2 nights ago, and it obscured the faces of the guests, who were currently filing through the front door. I watched from the shadows of the mezzanine landing, my hand resting on the polished oak railing. Below me, the room was filling up with men who did not look like investors. They wore suits that cost too much but fit too poorly. Their wrists were weighed down by gold watches the size of hockey pucks. They did not admire the architecture or the history of the lodge. They walked in, scanning the room with calculating eyes, tapping the walls, as if checking for hidden safes or structural weaknesses. I recognized the man at the center of the group immediately from the dossier I had compiled. Giovanni Moretti, the shadow owner of Viper LLC. He was shorter than I expected, with a thick neck and a nose that had been broken more than once. He walked with a limp and the air of a man who was used to people moving out of his way. Marcus rushed forward to greet him, his arms spread wide in a gesture of fake hospitality. "Mr. Moretti, welcome to our humble home. It is an honor to have you here for this historic transition." Moretti did not smile. He shook Marcus's hand briefly and then wiped his palm on his pants. "Let us hope the transition is smooth, Marcus. My partners do not like bumps in the road." I saw Marcus swallow hard, his Adam's apple bobbing nervously. "It will be smooth, Giovanni. She is ready. She is practically begging to sign." I stepped back into the darkness of the hallway. My heart was beating a slow, steady rhythm against my ribs. It was a rhythm of war. I adjusted the lapels of my midnight blue suit. It was sharp-tailored and intimidating. I had swept my hair back into a sleek, tight ponytail that pulled my features into focus. I applied a shade of lipstick that was darker than my usual neutral tone. A shade that said I was not here to negotiate. I was here to conquer. I checked my phone one last time. The screen showed a single green bar indicating that the sheriff's deputies were in position at the end of the driveway, waiting for the signal jammer to be deactivated. I put the phone in my pocket. It was time. I walked to the top of the grand staircase. The jazz band, a trio of bored musicians Marcus had hired last minute, was playing a slow, mournful tune. I took the first step. The sound of my heels on the wood was sharp and deliberate. Click, click, click. Heads began to turn. First Jamal, who was standing by the bar trying to impress a waitress. His jaw dropped. He nudged Tiffany, who was busy setting up her tripod near the fireplace. Tiffany looked up. She had expected a defeated broken woman in a funeral dress. Instead, she saw a CEO walking into a boardroom. Her smile faltered for a second before she remembered the camera was rolling. "Oh, wow!" she squealed, her voice shrill. "Look, everyone. Here she is. My sister-in-law, Sophia, coming down to pass the torch. Let's give her a round of applause for doing the right thing." The applause was scattered and polite. The men in the room did not care about family drama. They only cared about the deed. I descended slowly, keeping my eyes locked on Marcus. He was standing next to a small antique table that had been set up in the center of the room like an altar. On it sat a single document bound in blue leather and a heavy gold pen. As I reached the bottom step, Marcus rushed over to me. He grabbed my elbow, his grip tight and painful. "What are you wearing?" he hissed under his breath while maintaining a frozen smile for the guests. "You look like you are going to a court hearing." "I told you to look soft, vulnerable." I pulled my arm away, gently but firmly. "I am dressing for the occasion, Marcus." I said, my voice loud enough for the nearby guests to hear. "This is a business transaction, isn't it? I wanted to look professional for your partners." I looked directly at Moretti, who was watching me with narrow, suspicious eyes. I nodded to him. "Mr. Moretti, I presume. My father speaks so highly of your waste management solutions." Marcus coughed loudly, cutting me off. "He is a developer, Sophia." "A developer? Now come. Everyone is waiting. The notary is ready." He guided me toward the table. The notary, a nervous little man with sweat stains on his shirt, was organizing his stamps. Tiffany adjusted her ring light, blinding me for a moment. "Okay, guys, we are live," she announced to her phone. "We have over 5,000 viewers right now. Everyone wants to see the Brooks family unite. Sophia, say hi to the chat." I looked into the lens of her phone. I did not wave. I did not smile. I just stared until Tiffany laughed nervously and turned the camera back to Marcus. "All right," Marcus boomed, clapping his hands. "Thank you all for coming. Tonight is a bittersweet night. My daughter Sophia has tried her best to manage this estate, but as we all know, the hospitality business is a beast, and sometimes you have to know when to step back and let experience take the wheel." He paused, waiting for applause. Jamal clapped loudly. "So tonight," Marcus continued, "Sophia is voluntarily transferring the deed and full executive control of the Hattie Mountain Lodge to me. And in turn, I promise to take this legacy to new heights, to modernize it, to make it profitable." He gestured to the document. "Sophia, the floor is yours." The room went silent. The only sound was the crackling of the fire and the hum of Tiffany's equipment. I walked to the table. I looked down at the document. It was a standard quitclaim deed transferring all rights to Marcus Brooks for the sum of $1. I looked at the pen. It was heavy in my hand. I looked at Marcus. He was sweating profusely now. His eyes were darting between me and Moretti. "Just sign it, honey," he whispered. "Just sign it, and you are free." I looked at Tiffany. She was mouthing the words "do it" while checking her viewer count. I looked at Jamal, who was already texting his friends about the Lamborghini he was going to buy. They were all so sure. They were so confident in their victory that they did not notice that the projector screen behind me, which was supposed to be displaying a slideshow of family photos, had just flickered. I leaned forward. I placed the tip of the pen on the paper. Marcus let out a breath. He leaned in closer, eager to snatch the paper the moment the ink dried. "I am sorry, Dad," I said softly. He frowned. "Sorry for what?" "I am sorry that you never learned to count," I said. "Count what?" he asked, confused. "The cameras," I whispered. I lifted the pen. I did not sign. Instead, I tapped the pen twice against the table. Click, click. Instantly, the jazz music cut out with a screech of feedback. The lights in the great hall flickered once, twice, and then plunged the entire room into absolute pitch-black darkness. Screams erupted from Tiffany. A heavy thud echoed as someone bumped into a table. "What is going on?" Marcus yelled, his voice cracking with panic. "Jamal, check the breakers." "Stay where you are," a voice boomed from the darkness. It was my voice amplified by the surround sound system I had rigged earlier. The darkness held for 3 seconds. 3 seconds of confusion. 3 seconds of fear. And then a single spotlight beam cut through the blackness, illuminating not me, but the large projector screen hanging above the fireplace. The screen flared to life, not with family photos, but with a grainy, high-definition video. And as the image stabilized, the silence in the room returned. But this time, it was not the silence of anticipation. It was the silence of a grave being opened. The video footage played on the massive screen in crisp, unforgiving detail. It began with Tiffany in her party dress, smashing the $20,000 Ming vase and laughing about how ugly it was. Then it cut to Jamal hacking at the vintage wine bottle with a pocket knife, declaring his intention to sell the land for condos. But the final clip was the one that made the air leave the room. It was the grainy night vision footage of Marcus standing in the kitchen taking a wad of cash from Chef Tony. The audio was crystal clear, amplified through the speakers, so that every whisper sounded like a shout. "I don't care about the quality, Tony, just keep the costs down. We need to bleed this place dry before I sell it." The screen went black. The lights in the great hall slammed back on, blinding everyone for a second. Marcus was standing frozen by the table, his face a mask of pure horror. He looked at Moretti. He looked at the guests. He looked at me. Tiffany let out a strangled sob, dropping her phone. The live stream had captured everything. The comments section was scrolling so fast it was a blur of shock and condemnation. "What is this?" Marcus stammered, his voice trembling. "This is fake. It is deep fake technology." She edited it. I stepped forward, my voice calm and steady, cutting through his panic. "It is not fake, Marcus. And neither is this." I reached into my blazer pocket. I did not pull out a tissue or a phone. I pulled out a thick document bound in red legal tape. I dropped it onto the table next to the unsigned deed. The sound it made was heavy final. "This is a notice of default and immediate foreclosure," I said, addressing the room but keeping my eyes on my father. Marcus blinked. "Foreclosure? What are you talking about?" "The bank gave me an extension." "The bank sold your debt 6 months ago," I replied. "They sold it to a private equity firm called S.J. Holdings. S.J. Holdings specializes in distressed assets and high-risk liabilities." I paused, letting the name sink in. S.J. stands for Sophia Jenkins. "That is my professional name, Marcus." A gasp rippled through the room. Jamal's jaw hit the floor. Tiffany looked like she was going to faint. "I own your debt," I continued, my voice rising with authority. "Every single penny. I own the mortgage on your house in Denver. I own the loans you took out for your failed crypto schemes. And as of this morning, I own the lien on your personal assets. You owe my company $5.2 million. Marcus stumbled back, gripping the edge of the table for support. "No, that is impossible. You are a receptionist. You make minimum wage." I smiled. A cold, sharp smile. "I am a crisis management consultant for the largest hotel chains in the world. I fix billion-dollar mistakes. And you, Marcus, are my biggest mistake." I pointed to the document on the table. "You wanted this house. You wanted the title. You wanted to be the big man. Well, here is your chance. You can have the lodge. But first you have to clear the lien." I took a step closer, my voice dropping to a whisper that was louder than a scream. "Pay me, Marcus. Pay me the $5 million you owe, right now, or get out of my house." Marcus looked around the room frantically. He looked at Moretti, pleading with his eyes. "Giovanni, help me. You said you would pay $3 million. Just give it to her. We can still make a deal." Moretti stepped forward. He did not look at Marcus. He looked at me with a strange mix of respect and wariness. He cleared his throat. "Miss Brooks, I was unaware of the existing liens on this property. Your father assured me the title was clean. I looked at Moretti. My father lied to you, Mr. Moretti, just like he lied to his mother, just like he lied to me. And I suggest you check your own contracts, because selling a property with an undisclosed lien is a federal crime, and I have already sent a copy of his email to your legal team. Moretti turned to Marcus. His face was stone cold. You tried to sell me a foreclosed property, Marcus. You tried to defraud me. No, Giovanni, please. Marcus begged, sweat pouring down his face. It is a misunderstanding. She is lying. She is just a jealous girl. Moretti slapped Marcus. It was a sharp, brutal sound that echoed through the hall. You are done, Marcus Moretti spat. You are finished. He turned to his men. Let's go. This deal is dead. As Moretti and his entourage turned to leave, the heavy oak front doors swung open again. But this time it wasn't a wedding planner. It was the sheriff. Behind him were two deputies and a woman in a sharp gray suit holding a briefcase. Sheriff Miller stepped into the room, his hand resting on his belt. Marcus Brooks, he announced, his voice booming. I have a warrant for your arrest. Marcus looked at the sheriff, then at me, then at the open door. He looked like a trapped rat looking for a sewer. On what charges? He squeaked. Sheriff Miller pulled out a pair of handcuffs. Embezzlement. Fraud. And thanks to some new evidence we just received via livestream, conspiracy to commit insurance fraud. Tiffany screamed, No, Daddy, no. This cannot be happening. I stood by the table watching as the deputies marched over to my father. They grabbed his arms, pulling them behind his back. The click of the handcuffs was the most satisfying sound I had ever heard. Marcus struggled, twisting his head to look at me. Sophia, stop this, he screamed. I am your father. You cannot send your own father to jail. Ungrateful brat. I gave you life. I walked over to him. I looked him dead in the eye. You gave me nothing, Marcus, I said softly. Grandma gave me this lodge, and I gave myself a future. I turned to the sheriff. Take him away, Sheriff. He is trespassing on private property. As they dragged him out, kicking and screaming, Tiffany and Jamal stood huddled in the corner. They looked small. They looked pathetic. They were no longer the influencers or the golden children. They were just two people who had bet on the wrong horse. I picked up the unsigned deed from the table. I ripped it in half, slowly, deliberately. Then I tossed the pieces into the fire. The flames licked at the paper, consuming the last of Marcus's dreams. I turned to face the remaining guests, the staff, and the thousands of people watching online. My name is Sophia Brooks, I said, my voice ringing clear and strong. And the Hattie Mountain Lodge is under new management, effective immediately. The arrest of Marcus Brooks was not a quiet affair. It was chaos. The deputies were dragging him toward the door, but Giovanni Moretti was blocking the exit. The mob boss looked like a man who had just realized he had been served poison at a banquet. He stepped forward, his face purple with rage, ignoring the armed officers. He grabbed Marcus by the lapels of his expensive suit, shaking him so hard his head snapped back and forth. You lied to me, Marcus, Moretti roared, spitting in his face. You told me the title was clean. You told me this was a simple transaction. Do you know what happens to people who try to steal $3 million from my organization? Marcus whimpered, struggling against the handcuffs. Giovanni, listen. I did not know. She tricked me. We can fix this. I have other assets. You have nothing. Moretti spat, shoving him back into the arms of the deputies. You are a ghost, Marcus. And if the law does not finish you, I will. Sheriff Miller stepped in between them, his hand on his holster. Back off, Moretti. He is in custody now. If you want a piece of him, you will have to wait until he gets to state prison. And I suggest you leave before I start asking why you are trying to buy a property with a suitcase full of unmarked bills. Moretti glared at the sheriff, then at me. He adjusted his tie, regaining his composure. He knew when to fold. He signaled to his men, and they melted away into the night, leaving Marcus alone with the consequences of his greed. But the nightmare for my family was just beginning. Tiffany, who had been frozen in shock, suddenly realized that her phone was still broadcasting. She looked down at the screen. The comments were scrolling so fast they were a blur of hate. Hashtag scammer family, someone wrote. Imagine trying to steal from your own daughter. That pregnancy is definitely fake. Look at her drinking champagne. Arrest the sister-in-law too, she is an accomplice. Tiffany let out a scream, throwing her phone across the room as if it were burning her hand. It shattered against the stone fireplace, ending the live stream, but not the shame. "Stop it!" she shrieked, pulling at her hair. "Stop looking at me! We did not know! We are victims here!" She turned to Jamal, grabbing his arm. "Do something, Jamal! Tell them! Tell them we are innocent!" Jamal pulled away from her, looking at her with disgust. "Get off me! You were the one who wanted the mansion. You were the one who told me to sell the wine. This is your fault." He looked at me, his eyes pleading. "Sophia, please. You know I just went along with it. Dad made me. I can testify against him. Just don't let them take me too. I can't go to jail, Sophia. I am too pretty for jail." I watched them turn on each other like rats in a sinking ship. It was pathetic. It was inevitable. I walked over to Marcus, who was now weeping openly, as the deputies pushed him through the door. "Sophia," he sobbed. "Please. I am an old man. I cannot survive prison. Just drop the charges. I will sign whatever you want. I will leave the country. Just have mercy." I looked at him. I looked at the man who had thrown me out at 18, the man who had mocked my shoes, the man who had tried to sell my grandmother's legacy to a criminal. "Mercy is for people who make mistakes, Marcus." I said, my voice cold and final. "You made a choice. And now you are paying the bill." I nodded to the sheriff. "Get him out of here." As the patrol car lights flashed red and blue against the snow, Marcus screamed my name one last time, a sound of pure, desperate hatred that echoed through the valley. Then the car door slammed shut, and he was gone. The room was silent. The staff who had been watching from the kitchen doorway looked at me with awe. Mr. Jenkins, the old caretaker, stepped forward. "Miss Sophia," he said quietly, "what do we do now?" I looked around the great hall. I looked at the broken glass, the stained rugs, the terrified faces of Tiffany and Jamal. "Now," I said, taking a deep breath, "we clean up." I turned to Tiffany and Jamal. "You two have exactly 1 hour to pack your bags and get off my property. If you are still here at midnight, I will have you arrested for trespassing. And Tiffany, take your neon sign with you." "It is tacky," Tiffany sobbed, running up the stairs. Jamal followed, her head hung low. I walked over to the fireplace and picked up the shattered remains of Tiffany's phone. I tossed it into the trash can. The war was over. The king was dethroned. The queen was exiled. And the castle was finally safe. I walked to the window and looked out at the mountains, standing tall and silent in the moonlight. For the first time in weeks, the air felt clean. The flashing lights of the patrol car disappeared around the bend of the mountain road, taking the noise and the toxicity of my father with them. Silence finally settled over the Hattie Mountain Lodge. It was not the tense, suffocating silence that had filled these halls for the past week. It was a heavy, peaceful silence, like the world taking a deep breath after a storm. I stood on the front porch, watching the taillights fade. Below me on the gravel driveway, the final act of the Brooks family tragedy was playing out. Tiffany and Jamal were standing next to a pile of Louis Vuitton suitcases. They looked like refugees from a fashion show that had gone terribly wrong. Tiffany was frantically typing on her phone, likely trying to delete her social media accounts before the internet mob could find her. She looked up at Jamal, who was shivering in his thin designer jacket. "This is your fault," she screamed, her voice shrill and echoing off the trees. "You told me he had money. You told me we were set for life." Jamal held out his hands, pleading. "Tiff, baby, please. We can figure this out. I can get a job. We can stay at your mom's place until I get back on my feet." Tiffany laughed. It was a cruel, sharp sound. "My mom's place? Are you joking?" "You are nothing, Jamal. You are the son of a felon. You have no money, no prospects, and you are an embarrassment. I am not going to be dragged down with you." She pulled the diamond ring off her finger. The ring Jamal had bought with money he stole from my grandmother's petty cash fund years ago. She threw it at him. It bounced off his chest and landed in the mud. "I am filing for divorce in the morning," she spat. "Do not call me. Do not follow me. And tell your sister she wins. I hope you all rot in this mountain." A yellow taxi, which she must have called the moment the handcuffs went on, Marcus pulled up. Tiffany threw her bags into the trunk and climbed in without looking back. As the taxi drove away, Jamal stood alone in the dark. He bent down and picked up the ring, wiping the mud off with his thumb. He looked up at me standing on the porch. For a moment I thought he might apologize. I thought he might ask for forgiveness, but he just shook his head, his pride still too thick to swallow. He grabbed his bags and started walking down the long, dark road toward the highway. He had a long walk ahead of him, and an even longer life of regret. I went back inside and locked the heavy oak door. For the first time in my life, I felt truly safe in my own home. The next 6 months were a blur of hard work and restoration. But this time it was the kind of work that feeds the soul. I hired Mr. Jenkins back as the head of maintenance, giving him a 50% raise and a pension plan. We spent weeks scrubbing away the stain of Marcus and Tiffany. We removed the neon signs. We repainted the walls. We brought the soul of the lodge back to the surface. I did not sell the land to a developer. Instead, I honored my grandmother's original vision. I turned the estate into a high-end wellness retreat for executives recovering from burnout. It was the perfect pivot. I used my connections in the corporate world to fill the bookings. The same people who used to hire me to fix their companies were now paying thousands of dollars a week to come and fix themselves in the mountains. As for Jamal, I heard through the grapevine that reality hit him hard. With no degree, no work experience, and a last name that was now associated with a high-profile fraud case, he found his options limited. A few weeks ago, I was in town picking up supplies when I stopped at a roadside diner for a coffee. I sat in a booth near the kitchen. The swinging doors pushed open and a man walked out carrying a heavy tub of dirty dishes. He was wearing a stained apron and a hairnet. His hands were red and chapped from hot water and harsh chemicals. It was Jamal. He did not see me. He was too busy keeping his head down, scraping leftovers into a bin. The manager, a younger man with a clipboard, yelled at him to move faster. Jamal, the golden child who had mocked me for working hard, was now scrubbing grease off plates for minimum wage. I watched him for a moment, feeling a mixture of pity and validation. He was finally learning the lesson Marcus had failed to teach him. You eat what you kill. And if you don't kill anything, you wash the dishes of those who do. I left a $100 tip on the table and walked out before he could see me. That was the last time I saw him. Today marks exactly 6 months since the night of the arrest. It is also the day the legal transfer of the title became permanent. The lodge is officially mine, free and clear. I spent the morning with a sign maker I commissioned from Denver. We took down the old weathered sign that swung above the entrance. In its place, we hung a beautiful piece of hand-carved mahogany with gold lettering. It no longer says Hattie Mountain Lodge. It reads, The Hattie May Sanctuary. I stood on the balcony of the master suite this evening as the sun began to set behind the Rockies, painting the sky in shades of purple and gold. The air was crisp and smelled of pine needles and wood smoke. I held a glass of vintage wine. Not the cheap stuff Marcus drank, but a bottle I had bought to celebrate my own victory. I looked down at the driveway. It was empty of police cars. It was empty of moving trucks. It was just peaceful. I thought about my grandmother. I thought about the video she left me. She had tested me not because she doubted me, but because she wanted me to know my own strength. She knew that to keep this place, I had to be willing to fight for it. She gave me the weapon, but I was the one who had to pull the trigger. I took a sip of the wine, letting the warmth spread through my chest. They told me I was nothing. They told me I was the help. They told me I should be grateful for their scraps. Marcus thought he could bully me. Tiffany thought she could outshine me. Jamal thought he could inherit my hard work. They made the mistake of confusing silence with weakness. They thought that because I did not scream, I was not angry. They thought that because I did not brag, I did not have power. But they forgot the most important rule of the jungle. The lion does not roar when it is stalking its prey. It waits. It watches. And it strikes only when the outcome is guaranteed. I walked to the edge of the balcony and raised my glass to the empty mountains. Here is to the black sheep, I whispered. We are the ones who survive. If you have ever felt underestimated by the people who were supposed to support you, if you have ever had to build your own table because they would not give you a seat, if you have ever stayed silent while holding the keys to the kingdom, then this story is for you. You do not have to be loud to be powerful. You just have to be ready. Thank you for watching my journey. If this story resonated with you, please hit that like button and share it with someone who needs a reminder of their own worth. And don't forget to subscribe for more stories of truth, justice, and sweet, sweet revenge. I am Sophia Brooks, and I am finally home. Sophia's journey serves as a powerful reminder that true strength often whispers, while insecurity screams. We are conditioned to believe that defending ourselves requires noise, but as Sophia proved, silence backed by strategy is the ultimate weapon against toxicity. Your worth is never defined by those who refuse to see it, even if they share your bloodline. The moment you stop seeking validation from people committed to misunderstanding you is the moment you become untouchable. Build your own table, protect your peace, and remember, you do not need to explain your power to anyone, you just need to wield it. If this story inspired you to stand in your own power, please hit the like button and subscribe to our channel for more stories of justice and resilience. Share this with someone who needs to be reminded that the black sheep is often the strongest one in the flock.